Hey, you guys, and welcome to the Beyond Sundays podcast. Y'all, this is a live episode. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. Why don't you go ahead and say hello in the chats? We absolutely love hearing from you. But this is our bonus episode that wraps up our summer parenting series we've done this summer, and it was such a joy. We had so many awesome conversations, from trauma to technology, pornography, how to not lose your marriage while you're raising your kids, and so much more. So if you've missed out on any of those episodes, you can absolutely go back and listen anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. But as I was thinking about how to wrap up this summer series, as we're school is right around the corner, I thought, wouldn't it be neat to sit down with a licensed professional counselor and a children's pastor to actually ask questions about parenting? And don't you know, the Lord always answers in such fun and unique ways, because today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Josh Hardwick and Rebecca Haught. How are you guys doing today?
Hello, doing good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're good.
I'm so excited to have both of you. But before we dive into today's episode, why don't y'all share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and of course, share about your family, because it is a parenting podcast.
You want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. Well, hello, my name is Rebecca Haught. I am a licensed professional counselor and a registered play therapist. I have been in some form of private practice since I was a graduate student back in 2015. I've been fully licensed since 2018. I now work at Beltway Counseling Group, which is super exciting. And yes, at home, I have two little boys. They are wild and fun, but 6 and 3, so we're actually about to start kindergarten.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, we're headed into the start of school for our family.
Big transition.
It is, yes.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm Josh, and I've been on staff at Beltway for a little over 20 years. Started in 2004 and worked in children's ministry and family ministry for a long time. And a couple of years ago, felt the Lord stir something different. And so I have been working on a marriage and family therapy degree, stepping into counseling, transitioned over to Beltway Counseling Group, and getting to work with a great team over there, Rebecca and others. And it's a new season. Our family is obviously constantly in a season of change too. So we have 5. Joe and I have been married for 20 years, and we have 5 kiddos. 15, 13, 9, 5, and 2. So we're doing
awesome.
driver's ed and diapers at the same time.
Wow, driver's ed and diapers. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you guys so much for coming in today. You know, parenting is a journey, is it not?
Yes.
And sometimes, you know, whether you're raising kids that are toddlers or teenagers, we know that it is a physical journey. You know, if you have toddlers, you know, because you're tired right now. But it's spiritual too. It's emotional and it's mental, because, and it's not just that for us as parents, but it's also that for our kids too, because we as parents want to help our kids. We want to help them become all God has created them to be. And that includes their whole self, like body, mind, spirit, soul,
Sure.
you know, all of it. But sometimes we as parents get stuck, and we have questions, and we don't know how to move forward sometimes. And that's when seeking wise counsel, asking questions, is really beneficial when it comes to parenting, because we don't want to parent alone, right? There are people who've been there before. I know, speaking for myself, my own journey in parenting, there's been seasons where I've had to rely on community and even my own parents to ask the questions, right?
Sure.
So what we've been doing is I've been basically asking, you know, parents questions, people I know on social media platforms and also Beltway's social platforms, to ask, what questions would you have for a children's pastor, a former children's pastor, or a licensed professional counselor? What questions would you have? So today we're going to actually answer those questions that people sent in. But what I want to make sure we clarify real quick is that we are parents, and we have jobs, yes, but we're imperfect parents. Just like we're imperfect humans, we are imperfect parents, and there is only one perfect parent, right?
And even he had children that strayed away from him. So, I mean, the pressure's off in some ways. There's a lot of grace.
Absolutely.
Yes, I was mentioning earlier before the show that I felt like a little bit of a phony. Like, I don't feel like a parenting expert, but I think within my job and my career, I definitely view parents as the expert, because I'm a firm believer that God gave each child to their parents specifically for a reason. And so my role as a counselor is to help guide and to help kind of try to point in the right direction. But I ultimately believe Holy Spirit's going to give each parent the unique strategies, the unique boundaries, the unique values, whatever the specifics to the kids. And so hopefully we can kind of glaze over some of the top of stuff, but there's no better counselor than Holy Spirit. So we refer to him quite often as we need to.
Amen. He is the perfect parent. And ultimately, he knows our kids, and he knows us better than we know ourselves, and better than we know our kids. And he loves them, and he loves us so very much, right? And I know that my Heavenly Father is parenting me still. You know, and as I parent my kids, he's given me tons of grace, tons of kindness and patience as I've, followed him in my journey. But in parenting too, the same is true, that he is the perfect helper, perfect counselor. And yeah, absolutely. He's a good father. Y'all ready to get going on these questions?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's dive in. I'm going to pitch this first question to you, Josh. How do you continue to help how do you help develop character without quenching a child's strong personality that the Spirit has placed inside of them? And this question comes from Brittany.
That's great. Brittany and all the other parents who are asking this same question, including Josh. It's a great question. I actually think you have part of the answer in the question. It's recognizing that God has made and created, wired your child in a very specific way. And so that perspective, I think, is very helpful to know that what God is up to, he's inviting you to partner with him in shaping this child, right? There's not this pressure to somehow take what God has made and then fix it or launch it perfectly into the world, but the partnership with Holy Spirit to go, who is this child? What are the strengths? What kind of character does this my son or daughter have? And then how can I connect with them in a way that gives them the environment that they can flourish in, right? They can learn to grow, they can learn to trust, they can explore, they can fail. They can learn through those things without feeling like somehow their value or their worth is somehow diminished by those things. So for us, I think leaning into connection is probably the greatest thing, and that takes time. I mean, probably every answer we're going to give is going to come back to time, and that's one of the hardest things for parents because there's so many things that are vying for our time. But to create the environment with connection where your kids they see you as a source, right? A resource to help, a source of wisdom, compassion, comfort, empathy, all those things.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, to tag along to that question, there was a question by Brand, and she asks, how do you mold character without breaking their spirit? Like, I think there's a fear there that parents may have that as they're trying to discipline, for example, how do you continue? Like, I'm thinking of the strong-willed child, right? There are children. I have one who's strong-willed, and I know, like, I see in her destiny, I see God's calling on her life to be a leader, right? But I don't want to break the spirit that's strong within her in the process of helping her develop character. So,
great question. So of our 5, I would put 3 or 4 of them in that strong-willed category. And quite honestly, the thing that seems to be the most helpful for us in not breaking their spirit, because parents absolutely have the capacity to do that, is being very mindful of the tone and kind of the state of my own soul.
That's good.
Right, as a dad. So the times that I find myself stepping into harshness or being very critical, or just, when I say critical, I mean quick to point out the wrong. Our job is to correct, but we don't have to criticize everything, right? And so to not be harsh and critical invites the relationship. and it draws us closer. Same way the Lord does with me, right? So as I'm drawn to the Father, I'm way more open to and receptive to what he has to say.
Right.
And my kids, I see the same thing in them. I see the same thing where they come and say, Daddy, how do I do this?
Mm-hmm.
Or Daddy, why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those kinds of questions, as opposed to me just launching into some really long monologue about all the things that they need to know for life.
Yeah.
So
Can
That's
I
good.
Can I piggyback on that one?
Definitely. Yeah.
And I would say on top of that, when we are harsh and critical, because we do sometimes, we
Right.
parent out of our flesh sometimes. I think how we don't break their spirit is we come back to them and we try again. And we say like, hey buddy, I'm really sorry. The way that I, tried to correct you, or the way that I disciplined you earlier, it's not your fault that I was yelling, right? I'm sorry I did that. What I wanted to say was, I love that God made you curious, and I'm not going to let you throw rocks at the neighbor's house anymore, right? You can, and redirect them to something else. But like going back and doing it again and apologizing, I think is what it builds their spirit.
Yeah, for sure.
And it gives us chance to like get a do-over and be able to try to like course correct. And I think it strengthens the relationship too, and it gives us that opportunity to speak life into them. And because we're not going to get it right every time, especially whenever you have lots of little ones running around.
Absolutely.
A
So
lot.
parents, I hope you heard you get a do-over. Yay, right?
Yes.
We get to do it again. We get to revisit that place again. All right, Rebecca, I'm going to throw a question to you.
Okay.
This is just a question that was the first question I wrote down on the list, just because I know you've been a licensed professional counselor for some time, but what parenting questions are you asked most often as a counselor?
Yes, that one, honestly, it was kind of hard for me to nail down specifics, because I feel like every parent who's coming in has some variation of the question, help, what do I do? How do I, how do I manage this behavior? This thing has happened. How do we navigate it?
Right.
And I think oftentimes parents are wanting specific answers, and it's not always a specific course or a specific path in place.
Sure.
And so I'm always honored that parents will like allow me to go along on the journey with them to be able to navigate it together. And so, I don't know that I had one specific question that I hear over and over. In working with kids and counseling, we get a lot of questions about regulation. So the kid is, either very dysregulated going externally where behaviors get wild, or they're turning inward and they're dysregulated and it's going inward to them. And so I would put that at probably the top level of like the category of questions I get, but I don't know that it's ever been that I've had one on repeat that I just hear over and over.
Well, as you mentioned, regulation. That was one of the questions that I sent to you. And this comes from a friend named Bethany. She asked, when a child has reached the extremes of dysregulation, not just at the early stages, but at the extreme end, and becomes unresponsive to methods that she's trying like to help the child soothe, or not even responding to external stimulation, how can you help them in returning to a state of regulation?
Right. So at that point, the child has essentially flipped their lid. Right. Unfortunately, there's a level of like we have to let the train crash and pick up the pieces, because they can't even access the thinking portions of their brain. And so the coping tools, the methods, they're not capable of accessing them really. And so at that point, we really want to rely on co-regulation. So they're going to need to access your nervous system for you to stay regulated. So instead of saying, why don't you take those big deep breaths that Miss Rebecca has taught you about, instead you start doing it as the parent.
Wow,
so you are going to start doing those big deep breaths, and you really want to be able to name what they're feeling in that. There's a concept, the book The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel and Tina Bryson does a great job of laying it out. I highly recommend this book, but basically shows how to help reintegrate the brain again. They give a lot of strategies. One of them is name it to tame it. One of them is connect and then redirect. But in those concepts, basically we're talking to the emotional side of the brain so that we can help re-regulate the brain brain so that they can access their thinking portion of the brain. It's important to remember in kids, the thinking portion of the brain is not fully developed. It's still under construction for a long time. And so,
Yeah, that is really important to remember.
yes. And so, and the book does a great job of unpacking it. It's a fairly short read, and it gives very, very practical strategies and things you can go home and implement pretty immediately, which I appreciate.
Yeah. All books that we're going to mention today, I want to make sure our audience knows, will be linked in the show or the episode description later on after our live episode is completed. We'll absolutely have those links available for you guys. We'll have the titles and of all the books and all the things. So I just want to let you guys know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question. Josh, I'm going to kick it to you.
Okay.
This is from Shauna. How do you help children deal with the loss of not having all the same things their friends do, right? Kids often compare what they have versus what their friends have. And it's a hard thing, especially for kids who are looking to their friends for identity, which we know is the peer thing. And it's hard for them to navigate and learn that their identity is not wrapped up in materialism or things or what or their friends even, right?
Yeah.
Their identity comes from one place, and it does come from God. But how do you help your children navigate that, especially when it comes to things like cell phones and social media? And that's a question she wanted to ask you.
Well, my name's Josh, and I'm a recovering people pleaser. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
Can we just stop right there and just admit that it's hard? There's a part of us as parents that doesn't want to disappoint our kids. And there's another part of us as adults who struggle with comparing ourselves with other adults. And so you've kind of got to navigate both of those and really invite the Lord in to heal those places in our hearts so that we can model this in a healthy way with our kids. For us, I can just go to the cell phone thing, right? Because I think that's a pretty common thing for anyone who has a child who's walking at this point. They want a cell phone.
That's true.
So
2-year-olds want cell phones.
that's it. Like, I got to have it. I got to stay connected. So for us, as our oldest two are teenagers, and as they started to get closer to that, there were a lot more of their peers, friends at school, even teachers and classroom instruction would involve opportunities to access certain software, right, or platforms in the room for instruction. And so there was sort of this, it's not just for fun and what I want, but I need it for school and some of those things. And so there were pieces of that we wrestle with. There's probably a little bit of old school still in me of going, find a stone tablet and a chisel. I don't know. You don't have to have technology to do this. But for us, the way that we came to it with our kids, and I don't know that I can say this is the right way or anything like that, but this is what we felt like the Lord gave us, was we had 2 criteria before we were willing to entertain the conversation with our kids. And the first one was, you'll have a cell phone when we need you to have a cell phone, right? Not because you want to or because someone else does. But if there's a phone is a communication device at its core, right? Or at least that's the way that we see it. And so as a point that we feel like there's a necessity for you to have this so that we can get in touch with you with your own schedule and activities and things like that we're growing as they get older. And the second thing is when the Lord says it's time. And I think probably, if I'm honest, from their teen perspective, that was not a fair statement from Dad, right? It's like, okay, you played the God card.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with that? How do you know, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know, but
What if God's telling me and he's not telling
That's
you?
right.
I hear that
He's
one a
such a
lot.
good father. He'll tell both of us. Yeah. But that was where we started. And then with our oldest, the Lord literally did that.
Wow.
I mean, I remember it was the kids had gone to bed that night. My wife was already in bed. I had brushed my teeth and was just walking around the bed to my side of the bed. And I felt like the Lord just dropped something in, right? And was like, hey, what if we talked about this? And so it wasn't like a for sure now, but it was a maybe we should entertain this. And so we started down that journey with the Lord and invited them in. And we have a contract agreement with our kids. Our oldest two do have a phone, and it is a battle. But also, the two parents in our house have a phone, and it's a battle. And so just recognizing that and trying to model that well.
Yeah.
So I think I kind of jumped off of your question and maybe didn't answer the how do you grieve the loss of it.
Yeah.
But I think if I can come back to that for just a second, the place of being settled, right? I am not seeking the approval of my child. There are lots of things that we do as parents that are for the good of my child that my child doesn't understand, right? I mean, Rebecca, you mentioned earlier, I'm glad you're curious, and we don't throw rocks at the neighbor's house, right? Like,
true story.
but I really want to.
But we need to see who can throw it the farthest.
It's
like,
not a good idea to jump from that high. It's not a good idea to put things in the toilet. It's not a good idea. Like there are a lot of things that are helpful as parents that our kids aren't going to see, and I have to be okay with that.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. I'm going to piggyback on the concept of loss and jump to how a question that one parent asked is like, what are the top 3 tools to help children heal past trauma? Like when there has been loss of any kind, but probably the bigger traumas.
Right.
How do you help? What are the 3 tools that help children heal past that place of grief? We know grief doesn't go away. It's not a fast thing. It's a process. What would you say, Rebecca? This question comes from Aaron.
Okay. I think my first thoughts with it, I think anytime we're dealing with trauma, understanding is so important. And so understanding how trauma impacts the brain, how it impacts the body, because with that breeds empathy and connection that can come from that. And I think connection is probably the biggest tool that can come to help heal trauma with that. There's great resources out there. The Connected Child and the Connected Parent are both pretty easy reads that I feel like are straightforward. Sometimes whenever you dive into trauma, some authors can make it very complex and it's difficult to digest or understand. So I would recommend trying to find an easy read of some sort that can help you give an understanding of what's happening, because this is a good kid that's having a hard time typically, and we want to remember that at the core of who they are. So I would say understanding and connection, followed by, I think it's pretty imperative that caregivers have some sort of respite or community around them, because it can be a very difficult journey. I think if you can have community that even also understands the trauma, that's better, because I think from the outside looking in, kids with trauma behaviors, it can look, I think parents can take a lot of the self-blame because they feel like I'm not doing this parenting thing right, or they're just at a big loss a lot. And so to have community around you that can encourage you, that can support you, maybe if it's other parents that have also parented kids with trauma, that can be super beneficial. And then for you to be able to have that respite piece too, where you can take care of yourself as a caregiver, I think that's vitally important in parenting kids with trauma. And then my third thing, this is going to kind of feel like, if you were given 3 wishes and like one of your wishes is unlimited wishes, so that you can keep having more wishes that every kid ever did, But I would say therapy. I mean, obviously I'm a play therapist, but I think whenever you get into therapy, you can really get those specific tools that are going to help your child with their specific trauma behaviors, whether that's lying or stealing or hiding things, or, whatever the specific trauma responses are coming up, we can really start to get in and help them process through the trauma, but also give you as a parent specific tools that are going to be able to directly speak to whatever the behaviors are that are currently coming up.
Yeah, I would jump on that last one and just encourage parents, if your child is in therapy, trying to work through some of those things, lean in. Right, I think Rebecca does a great job of this, where she does connect with parents and tries to put tools in your toolbox, but lean in, and that might even mean getting specific help for yourself to be able to learn the kinds of tools maybe that the therapist is employing in session with your child, but also to be able to equip yourself and take those things home, because an hour a week is a great break, where the child maybe experiences it differently, but the other 167 hours is tough.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned earlier before we actually pressed record on the conversation how important it is for parents to take care of themselves. Would you mind speaking into that as well? Just in the idea of not parenting out of a place of emptiness.
sure. I mean, the state of our soul influences everything that we do. The way that I view God, the way that I view myself, the way that I view my family, the way that I interpret events and experiences, and the things that are happening around me or to me. And so I know, as a young parent, I would often get offended by the behavior of my kids, right? I would take it personally. Like, how, after everything that I've done for you, how can you spit in my face? Literally or metaphorically. Both have happened, right? So, but to be able to just recognize those places, why am I triggered by this thing? And really lean into that, whether it's in therapy or with a trusted friend or your small group, with the Lord. Holy Spirit, why was that a big deal? Why does the eye roll send me into overdrive, right? Why do I want to go and remove eyes? Just kidding. Don't send me an email. But why do I react the way that I do, right, to those kinds of things? And largely it's because there are places that are still needing to be healed in me, right? There's somehow I'm wrapped my identity up in the way that my child does or doesn't respond to me, or how they perform at school or at church, for sure, right? Being a pastor's kid at church is one of the hardest things to do. I was a pastor's kid. My kids are pastor's kids. You're a pastor's kid.
I'm a pastor's kid.
I mean, like all the things, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, I think just being mindful of the ways that that those behaviors can hit us.
Yeah.
And then being able to get that perspective again and go into empathy and connection instead.
It's good.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move into a topic about boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
Boundaries are good because they keep our children in safe places and they're helpful, but they're hard, especially in certain age groups where children want to push boundaries and they're pushing for various reasons, but whether they're a toddler or a teenager, they're pushing. So the question is, how do you help hold the boundaries with especially teens? This question comes from Maitland, but I think it's a question that can be answered for any age group. How do you hold boundaries well when your kids have the desire to constantly push the boundaries? What does that look like, Josh?
So one of the greatest books that I have come across was referred to me by Jennifer Smotherman, who is our clinical director at Beltway Counseling Group, and she is also she provides my supervision, which is awesome. But Raising Kids with Big Baffling Behaviors by Robyn Gobbel is fascinating, eye-opening. Are you familiar with that
It's
one?
in my car right now. I didn't
in
bring
your
it
car,
in. Yes,
see?
I should
So-
have brought it.
But one of the things that she says in there multiple times that really resonated deep with me and challenged me is all behavior makes sense. And so when you have a child who's pushing a boundary, whether it's a teenager that is pushing back on curfew or friends or technology, I mean any of those things, or you've got a 2-year-old that doesn't go to bed, right? I have both. And the
Good for
behavior
you.
makes sense. The behavior makes sense, right?
Yeah.
How does the behavior make sense? So again, to kind of go back to, I'm not going to be personally offended by the fact that you're pushing back on this, but go underneath and say, why this behavior? Why this response? And really trying to see things from their perspective. When I've got a 2-year-old that is flipping out in the middle of the night because he woke up and he's completely disoriented, and I remember that the beginning of his life was much more traumatic than my other children.
Yeah.
And things that are completely outside of our control. And so I can be upset that I'm up at 3 a.m. again, or I can enter in with him to that place and allow him to access my nervous system and co-regulate and bring him back down so he can get sleep. And as I do that, I'm begging the Lord to come and heal, right?
Yeah.
Because these are things that I can't touch. You know, it's stuff in his system that I can't get to. And so the same thing is true when I've got a kiddo that, you know, one of our older ones that really want more freedom, right? Lord, help me take my hands off in a way that is still caring for them, providing safety and structure and the things that they need, but allowing them to experience some freedom and maybe fail in safe ways, right? So,
Fail in safe ways. That's a good one. That's good. I like that.
thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
how to do that well all the time, but
Well,
it sounded really good, didn't it? But we have to learn how to fail, right?
Yeah.
If I have a fear of failure, then that handicaps so much of my life as I move forward into adulthood.
yeah. Well,
And so-
at its base is fear. We don't
So-
want our kids operating out of fear, and we don't want to operate out of fear either, because fear paralyzes us in the calling and destiny that the Lord has for us. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Allowing that space to fail in your home, right? But
Or you
also,
can help them process
yeah,
the
helping them
failure
process, for
afterwards,
sure.
that you're there to help guide them along that
not known
process.
to do it.
Yeah.
That's really good. Okay, I'm going to kick a question to you, Rebecca. What is the best way, or how do you teach your kids it's okay to be bored? Because, I mean, we're in a society where technology is king, right? I mean,
Yes.
there's iPads everywhere. You're in a restaurant, you see kids with their iPads or their cell phones. Like, technology is everywhere. And it's the idea is to be entertained constantly, or the mentality of what's next. So how do we help our kids, and this comes from Nikki, how do we help our kids be okay with boredom? And at what limit of technology do our kids begin to lose the ability to use their imagination? Like, we want them to have healthy imaginations, and we don't want technology, stealing that from them. And so I think that's her question, is what's the best way to teach your kid it's okay to be bored, and let's use our imagination today.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of setting up your lifestyle to allow for them to be bored. If we're modeling as parents, if we're always going on to the next thing, or every time we sit down, we get out our phone and we're scrolling on something, we're modeling that it's not okay to be bored too. So I think we first look inward of like, am I demonstrating that this is a value that we hold as a family? So I think that's a good starting place. I think after that is you just kind of help set the narrative for them with, hey, this afternoon, right? We don't have anything else we're going to do today. It's your job to go play, right? And if they're like, well, I don't know what to play, or I want to go do this, you can help try to facilitate, like, right, well, you have these blocks, or you have this thing. Oh, what about that puzzle you got a while back? Try to give them a springboard of ideas. So I feel like because of technology, our kids do have a harder time playing independently than we used to, because technology starts a lot earlier on too, and it's always available. It's more readily accessible. I think back to my childhood, we didn't even have cable until I was in middle school, and so you had to wait for the specific show to come on at the specific time, and after it's 28,
DVR it.
yes, and after the 28 minutes were over, it was over, and you went on about your way. And so I think with that, we have to set the boundaries that we feel like are appropriate, or that we feel like we've been given as a family with technology, to allow the space for our children to be bored. And then might have to help them in building that skill set of how do I play, or kind of give them a springboard off of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, at what limit do they lose their imagination? I think that's so child specific.
Yeah.
In the playroom, it's fun. I have 11-year-olds that still love to come into the playroom, and it is such imaginative plays. And I have 6-year-olds who don't know how to play in there anymore, and they're like, what do I do? And so I don't know. I'm sure there is a correlation between technology and imaginary play. I also have some kids that technology is like, they can create imaginary things within it, and like their Minecraft worlds are out of this world that I get to see, and like some of that is the avenue that they are allowing their imagination to flourish. And so
That's a good point.
I don't know that it's always just as direct or straightforward that there's a specific age or a limit, but I think it's based off of what the feedback you're getting from your child, right? They're kind of losing this part of their imagination. I wonder if we do need to cut back here, or I wonder if we do need to allow for a little bit more of this, or So I was going to say that's not a very direct answer, but I
think it's good.
I thought it was phenomenal.
a kind of roundabout way of saying
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all different.
Yeah, and I wonder too about just maybe looking for the opportunity to enter into it with them.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you talked about facilitating it and kind of
Yes.
helping that, but like, what if is such a great question. What if we went outside and, we went for a walk, or we went into some sort of story,
Right.
where they get to direct it.
Yeah.
Oh, children love that.
Right? It's the best. Kids always want to tell parents what to do anyway. And so if we're doing this within the context of something that, we're getting outside of the being entertained by things, but we're doing it, right? Like,
We're creating.
it's just
yeah.
and it doesn't take much. Like maybe that's an important thing to say out loud, is that I think we can overthink it. I had a weekend a few months ago where my wife and our girls were out of town, and so it was just me and the two boys, and so they're 2 and 5 and 40, and the best thing that we did that weekend was we set up a tent in the living room, and we camped
That's fun.
in the living room.
And they'll remember that forever. Core memory.
Apparently, that's what makes you a good dad.
Well done.
A survey says put the tent up in the living room. It
It's
doesn't.
simple.
It doesn't take much, but
Yeah.
yes, it absolutely creates a
But
core memory.
and if you think about it too, we're building imagination, we're fostering connection. We talked about it touches on that time piece. It also helps you enjoy being a parent
that's
sometimes,
good.
right? Which I
Yeah.
think we can lose that sometimes. It kind of can. It's grounding in a lot of ways. Back to the basics of what parenting can be, but it requires intentionality. So
Yeah.
it's good.
Oh, that's a good.
we're always
that's
fighting for it.
Such a good idea. I love that. All right, I'm going to kick this question to you, Josh. We're going to talk about spiritual giftings. How do you help your children grow in the things that you're seeing them, like the spiritual gifts that you think that they may have or that you're seeing? How do you help them flourish in the things that God's placed inside of them? And this question comes from Bristy.
All right, Bristy, great question. How do I grow in my spiritual giftings? Might be a place to start. I know I've had lots of conversations with parents who are who may be in this place of feeling under-equipped in this arena.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't grow up in church, or I didn't learn about these things when I was younger, and so
You don't feel qualified.
I don't feel qualified, right? You've got your children's ministry is talking about the prophetic, and so I've got a kid that's dreaming and brings these, but I have no idea what to do with this. Learn.
That's good.
I mean, you can always learn, but I think also not allowing fear to come in and communicate somehow that you're not the right parent. Acts 17 is really clear that the Lord chooses the times and places that we would live, and does that so that we would have the best opportunity to know Him, and that includes me as a parent, and that includes my kids.
Yeah.
And so somehow the Lord has decided to give you this child with these giftings at this time, and so if the Lord set this up, I might encourage you to check with Him about maybe what was He up to when He decided that this was the right way to do it. Because I don't think He ran out of parents to distribute kids to, and He wasn't like, I don't know, what am I going to do with this one?
Yeah.
It's intentional on His part, and so I think being willing to learn and lean into that, and creating environments where they can practice it, and so that might not be you right now, right? It might be that you have to seek out other avenues where they can explore some of those.
That's good.
Some of those things.
That's
where
practical.
There
Yeah.
are some other folks, maybe in your church family, that you can lean on and invite into that. So
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, just to piggyback on that question, though. Her second question, Bristy's second question, had to do with how do you cultivate in an environment where the spiritual realm is just as real as the physical realm that our kids live in, right? It's an
Yeah.
abstract concept for kids in general, but how do we help them learn that just as there's this physical realm that you can see, hear, smell, taste, all that, like there's a spiritual realm that's just as important.
yeah.
So How do you navigate that? How do you cultivate that environment in your home?
Well, we live in a world where two kingdoms are at war, and that context I think matters in every arena that we're discussing today.
Yes.
There's another question further down the page.
Yeah, you can go ahead and go there.
Similar, right? Like, how do I help my kids to really believe that Jesus is real?
Right.
Right. Because he's like, I haven't seen him, but I see these characters or these people on YouTube that I love watching. Are they real? I mean, they're more real to me than Jesus is, right? Because I see them, and every week they've got new content, and where's the new content from Jesus? So, but the two kingdoms, we don't live outside of two kingdoms and choosing one. We are living in one of the two kingdoms. We're choosing the ways, the climate, the culture of our home. And so as parents, I think Deuteronomy 6 is a great place to be reminded that we're to be talking about these things and modeling these things in everything that we do. Yeah. Right? Coming and going, waking and sleeping, and along the road. So what conversations are we having, right? When difficult things come up. Yeah. We have two TVs at our house that are both broken because children. And what do we do with that? Are we complaining and we're negative about it all the time, and do we point fingers and assign blame, or do we look at it as an opportunity to do something different, right? And maybe be more imaginative in our play. Yeah. We had the battery in our van died a couple of weeks ago, and it was like really inconvenient. I think it was on a Wednesday, and so Wednesdays are very, very full days in our family. We have work and school and youth activities and all of the different things to kind of balance. And it was right at kind of a big commuting in between places time of the day. I get a text that my wife is like, "Car's stuck in the garage, can't go anywhere." Uh-oh. And it's like, man. And then maybe an hour into this, I just stopped and went, hold on a second. The time, the date on the battery was for last month. It's a 3-year battery, and it expired last month. We actually got an extra month out of this battery. We're going on vacation a week later. The car did not die while we were on vacation or in between here and there. Yeah. Like perspective. And so having those conversations with our kids, inviting them into that process, I think is super important. Jesus is very much in the mix. The Lord is in the details of our lives.
It's helping them see kind. That. Yeah.
And so I think the way that we interact with the Lord, I mean, if he's normative, if he's a normal part of our conversation, if we're asking Holy Spirit, what do I do about this? Yeah. And we're doing that in a way that our kids can pick up on that and learn this is not just mom and dad, shooting it off the cuff and
or giving me the Bible answer
or just or if you're going to give the Bible answer, give the Bible answer about everything, not just the thing that you're trying to correct in your child. Right? Don't just let him be the heavy, but also be the man, this is so exciting. We get to give. We get to give back to our church. We get to give to someone who has a need. And why do we do that? Because the Lord talks about being a cheerful giver.
That's right.
And how blessed we are. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the normal things of life. That is what creates the environment of our home.
That's good.
And so whatever we make normative, every child thinks their house is normal. Yeah. I didn't know that because I thought my house was normal. You know what I mean? Like the things that you experienced as a child, you thought every child experienced. The same thing is true for each of us. And so if we want our kids to have the opportunity to experience the supernatural as natural, if we want them to experience the Lord as present and near, that's the way that we do it. I think Jeffrey talked about it well the other day, maybe 2 weeks ago, when he was talking about our tendency to pray for healing or to do other things for healing, right? Yeah. Like, do we pray and take medicine, or do we just
Right.
go? Do we just jump to the med? You know, like
Yeah.
But those are good practical examples, I think, of how we perceive the kingdom of God and our place in it.
That's good.
So
That's good. Speaking of making things normal, one of the hardest conversations, I know parents, you're one of the biggest questions that you have, and one of the hardest conversations is, when do you start talking to your kids about things like their sexuality, homosexuality, or other heavy life questions that you wonder, is this time? Is it too early? Am I too late? Like, what does that look like? So I'm going to kick this question to Rebecca first, and you feel free to jump in too. But this question comes from Jamie. When's the right time to start talking to your kids about these hard conversations like sexuality?
Now. I mean,
That's what I
not
was thinking, yeah.
like yes, but no. I mean, kids typically they're curious and they have questions and they bring stuff up. Hey, why does this happen? Or hey, you know, that dog has their puppy out of their booty, right? And you're like, well, you know, like how do we
Keep it real, y'all.
like? And so I'm a big fan of the drip, drip, drip method.
Yeah.
We just constantly want to be dripping. We don't want to. Doesn't mean I have to have a whole sex talk with my 4-year-old
Right.
about that. But they had this question, and I need to answer it honestly, right? I don't want to shut it down and say, well, you're not old enough for us to really talk about that yet. Or,
Right.
you know, we'll get to that whenever you're a little bit older, because they learn, oh, mom can't handle that, right? I'm not going to
I'm
her
not going to go to her.
with her
And
those
that's
questions,
the opposite
right?
of what you want. You want your kids
Exactly.
to come to you when
Yes.
they have
Right.
questions.
And then what
right?
they do is they're like, well, so-and-so on the bus has a phone, and like, I'll ask them, we'll look it up then.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you want, as they're having the curiosity or as they have the questions, or maybe as a show presents something that's not in line with your values or something, you use those as opportunities to just kind of give them a little tidbit. And if they have question, you answer the next question, right? I'm a big fan of like, they're going to ask what they're ready to process. And so we don't necessarily just have to lay it all out there. I don't think these need to be one-time questions. They need to be a series of questions over and over and over. There are some good resources I really like on Instagram. Birds_bees is a great one. And she gives a lot of how do you start having some of these conversations, or how do you answer that question whenever that
Right.
comes up, that I
Yeah.
feel like can give a good framework for that. I use a curriculum in my office that's God's Design for Sex, that I often have parents kind of read the parent portion of it and then flip through the book, and they can decide for themselves if they're like, oh, this is a resource I would want to have. I like that resource because it actually breaks it down into 4 different books.
Yeah.
And it's age appropriate. So it's 3 through 5-year-olds, 5 through 8-year-olds.
That's good. Yeah.
Just so it kind of gives you a grid of like, what would this age group be ready to
Ready
hear?
for,
Which I
yeah.
think is a lot of parents, they're like, it's not necessarily that I don't want to have the conversation. I just don't feel equipped to have the conversation. And so, so I think those are great resources to be able to refer to, but it's never too young. I think we really want to always be having the conversation with them as it comes up organically with them, as either they take advantage of the opportunity or as we see an opportunity to be able to just kind of give them a nugget for where our family holds value and what we believe
Yeah.
in those things.
That's good.
Yeah. I don't really think there's anything else specifically that I would add. I really would highlight, answer the question. Don't answer what they're not asking. Don't try
Yes.
to over answer.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the second thing would be, they're going to be curious about these things sooner than we think.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wondering, if you're asking this question as a parent, then the answer is now. Because I don't think you asked this question too soon,
Yeah.
and so I would trust the Lord in that, that He's bringing this up for you, and it would be a good thing to begin entering into some of those conversations.
That's
Yeah.
good. All right, we're going to switch gears, and this question comes from Jody, and she asked, and I think I'm going to pitch this to you, Josh. How do you help each child? You know, each child is unique and special. How do you help each child feel unique and special when you have a big family?
Yeah. Oh, when you have a big family, yes. Yeah. Humility,
Oh, yeah.
first of all, recognizing that sometimes life gets ahead of you. It can be a challenge, right? So we have 5, and all 5 of our kids are unique. They each one have unique to them ways that they feel valued, ways that they feel special, ways that they feel loved. And so the easy way that I don't think is effective, the easy way to parent is to one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
And just, well, we tell them every night that we love them and we tuck them in and we do, or we all do these things together. It is important to do those things together, but recognizing how your child is wired and what it is that fills their tank. 5 Love Languages for Kids, a great resource to really identify what are the things that are going to check the box for your kid.
Yeah. What's going to fill their tank.
Yeah, and it's going to change over time.
Sure.
Right? Boys, different than girls. Different at 2 than 5, then 9, then teenager. Every season of life, it's going to look differently. And so I think spending the time to learn your child, and the larger your family is, the more time it's going to take. But you can't get away from it without time.
Yeah.
You just have to put in the time. And so that might look like, for some of them, it might look like, activities that you do together, right? For others, it may look like conversations that you have. For others, it may be actual physical interaction, right? So right now, like I got home last night. Today's Thursday, yeah. So Wednesday night, I got home. It was about 8:30, and what we want to do at 8:30 with a 2 and a 5-year-old are get them to bed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But what we needed to do at that time was wrestle. Right.
Fun.
Which is really backwards, right?
It's time to wrestle with the boys.
It's really backwards because that's going to fire them up and make it hard to go to bed, right? I heard her go, right? But you know what? They needed it. And so we tickle fight for 15, 20 minutes, and their laughter does stuff for me as well, it melts away the things of the day, and we're able to connect. I can't do that with my 15-year-old.
Right.
Right? She's like, for real.
You'd see the rolling the eyes
absolutely, happen. Right? But to be able to do that, right, and then get them to bed, and then sit down next to my 15-year-old and just talk to her like, so what are you thinking about your schedule? You got your schedule today for the school year. What are you excited about? What are you nervous about?
Yeah.
Different things like that. So you're looking for the different ways that each one of them receive love and feel valued, because knowing I'm loved and valued is different than feeling loved and valued.
It's good. So again, it's knowing your child and dialing into that place.
Holy Spirit, help me.
Yeah, for real. Okay, we've got time for like maybe one probably question, actually, now that I've looked at the time. So we've talked a lot about, we didn't even get through all the questions today. And I know that there were other questions that were submitted kind of later on, but I think at the base of this, we've got parents who love their children, who are concerned for them and want the best for their kids. And so if parents really are concerned or worried about their child, whether it's an issue that they're having or it's something spiritual, what should they do? Would you mind each kind of answering that question? Just give some encouragement in that place. What can they do?
Yeah, definitely reach out. I feel like in the counseling world, we so appreciate parents who even just want to call and like, can I just meet for a consult? Like, is this normal, or is this something that should warrant therapy? Or, what do you think about this? Just trying, because I know there's a level of like, you only know what you know. And so seeking outside counsel to be able to help facilitate, and should I get help? But I feel like, counseling's not the only way we can get help. There's children's pastors, there's youth pastors, there's your kids' life group leaders, there's teachers, there's school counselors. Like, the list goes on and on. Like, access your resources and help try to get other perspective within that, other parents around you. I feel like that it's unlimited, but definitely reach out. I feel like what the enemy wants, nothing more, is just to keep us isolated in it, or to think I'll get help when, right? And that's that's the hardest part in therapy, is whenever we're already past crisis and we're having to put out lots and lots of fires. It's so much harder to make progress, as opposed to like, we're doing really well and this one thing, we're getting stuck here, right?
Yeah.
Like, can we have help with this one thing? It feels like a much more proactive approach. So definitely reach out. Don't let anything keep you from reaching out, getting on lists, finding somebody who has openings, talking with another parent.
It's good.
And I think probably just to add to that is our prayer life as parents is absolutely mission critical.
Mm-hmm.
The God of the universe is for your family. Family was his idea to begin with. And every single one of your children is near and dear to his heart. So whether it's a stuck place or a place that you're discouraged or a place that you just feel, under-equipped or unprepared for, call on heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Call on heaven. If you're married, call on heaven with your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, find another parent, another trusted friend. Find someone that can agree with you in prayer.
That's
right?
good, yeah.
Praying with your kids, praying in front of your kids, praying about your kids. I mean, all of those things. Lord, come and continue to heal me so that I can show up best for my kids. But the way that we view prayer and all of that, I think, is directly connected to how we end up parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Oh, this conversation has been so good. I wish we could do another hour.
Yeah.
We keep going.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, we need some lunch. It's lunchtime. And I know you guys have to get lunch too. But thank you so much for joining us for this live episode of the Beyond Sundays podcast. For links and resources mentioned today, we will definitely have those listed in the comments. But before you go, I wanted to invite you to join us for our next Beyond Sundays podcast series, which is, again, going to be all on video, you guys. I'm so excited. But we are going to dive into an 8-week series that will drop on September 10th. And we're going to be talking about the decisions we make. How do we get stuck in decision making, and how do we actually overcome the places that we might get stuck? So what happens between our good intentions and the choices that we make? Because we want to make better decisions, but oftentimes we do get stuck in that place. So Beltway Park is going to be diving into an 8-week journey with a book that Craig Rochelle wrote called Think Ahead. Better decisions, fewer regrets. It's going to be amazing because we want to be people who make decisions not out of places of fear or some other type of emotion, being stressed or overwhelmed, but there are key decisions we can make for the God-honoring life that we ultimately want. So join us for that series beginning September 10th. Better decisions, fewer regrets, so that we can continue to walk into the destiny and calling that God has for us. And you guys, we hope you have a fantastic day. Be blessed. And remember, God is always moving, and he's moving in